Kwame Tumao Ajam. I was a good kid, man. I got messed around in life. Tried, convicted, and sentenced to die for a crime I did not do. All before my 18th birthday. I spent 28 years in prison. 3 years on death row.
My name is Randall Padgett. I was convicted of murdering my wife. I was sentenced to death by electrocution in the state of Alabama. I thought, well, I'm innocent. I'll be fine. But I wasn't fine. In the courtroom in the United States, the truth was supposed to be the foremost thing, and it's not. They're just keeping score on who can win this game.
I am Sabrina Butler. I served 6.5 years on Mississippi's death row for a crime I did not commit. In 1989, I was convicted of killing my son. When I made it to death row, I was 19 years old. They put me in a 6x9 cell no bigger than your bathroom. It's like being buried underground with the lid on top of you and you can't breathe. That's what death row is like.
My name is Ronald Courtney. I spent 22 months on death row for a crime that I did not commit.
I was 9 days from my execution date when a man confessed that he did the murder. And it turns out he's a police officer. He said that he gave his gun to the sheriff, and the sheriff says, "You get the hell out of town. I'm running for re-election right now. We can't have a dirty cop."
My name is Kerry Drinker. I was arrested and convicted of a robbery murder. I spent almost 6 years on death row in Alabama for a crime I didn't commit.
Hello. I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight for day one of our 3-day virtual event. Hello, I would like to thank everyone for joining us for day one of our 3-day virtual event on wrongful convictions. During these 3 days, we will try our best to educate you and let you know the causes and the consequences of wrongful convictions. Today, we will be bringing to you 3 speakers, first of which is Marvin Cotton Jr. He is an exoneree, founder and CEO of Better Not Broken LLC, founding member of National Organization of Exonerees, and he's on the board of the nonprofit organization Debunking False Jailhouse Informant Testimony. So now we bring to you Marvin Cotton Jr.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here today. So I appreciate everybody who hands went into pulling this together today. As she said, my name is Marvin Cotton Jr., and I spent 19 years, 7 months, and 12 days in prison for a crime that I didn't commit. I spent those years really fighting every day to prove my innocence. It's easy to be falsely accused and wrongfully convicted, but it is very hard, even with overwhelming evidence that shows that you are innocent, in order to overturn that conviction and establish your innocence. It is very hard. That's why I spend my time now advocating in order to shed more light on wrongful convictions in America. You know, wrongful convictions are really America's little dirty secret. The government knows that it happens. It knows the reasons and the causes that it happens, but it does not address them. So you have wrongful convictions that's being ignored by really the only people that can do something about it. Um, Wrongful convictions, the root word in wrongful convictions is wrong. A lot of people have a misconception that somehow the person that was wrongfully convicted did something wrong, or was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or no, the wrong and wrongful conviction falls on the government. It falls on the state. So you have a wrongful conviction, the state is responsible. Even if you have witnesses that was not being honest or not telling the truth, the state is responsible. So the wrongful conviction doesn't fall on the one that was fighting in order to prove their innocence. It falls on the government. Well, as the people, citizens, tax-paying citizens in America, we have a responsibility to hold our government accountable. So anytime you have wrongful convictions, of course, the government is responsible to address the things that causes it, but we are responsible to hold our government to account. And there are some prosecutor offices throughout the country establishing what is called conviction integrity units. And conviction integrity units is the government's attempt to really establish some sort of accountability in their offices. I was released due to a conviction integrity unit. A conviction integrity unit is responsible for reviewing past cases, convictions where the convictions or the integrity of the conviction is in question. I was able to convince a conviction integrity unit that is established within the prosecutor office to review my case. It took them 2.5 years. It don't normally take that long, but it took them 2.5 years. I have a very complex case with a lot of police corruption, a lot of misconduct, a lot of things were being hidden. So it took 2.5 years for them to review my case, and I was released October 1st, 2020. So I've been out just over a year now, and I've spent my time since I've been out being an advocate and an activist, not only for the criminal justice system, correcting the criminal justice system, but also social justice, because they're really interchangeable. The things that we see wrong in our criminal justice system comes from social problems. Police officers that's using Nazi Germany tactics in Black and brown and poor white communities throughout the country. One thing that I've learned since I've been out and communicate with so many exonerees all over the country is most of the exonerees are Black, brown, or poor white. I haven't seen any rich exonerees. I haven't seen any exonerees that come from affluent lives and well-to-do communities. It seems like wrongful convictions or the neglect and even the malicious things that goes into a wrongful conviction, it is really targeted towards those that don't have money, don't have knowledge, and don't have advocacy, doesn't have a voice for themselves or nobody else speaking up for them. Which I try myself and those that are with me the National Organization of Exonerees, we try to fill in those gaps and really be a megaphone when it comes to wrongful convictions. We travel around the country. We were heavily involved in Kevin Strickland case. As you know, Kevin Strickland was released maybe a week and a half ago. We went down there, we threw rallies for him. We spoke to everybody involved. We even sat down with the Attorney General of Missouri, and we had a very candid, raw conversation with him, because that's a part of our advocacy work. We can't mix words or mince words when it comes to something as serious as justice. I don't care who winning or who losing. All I care about is if justice wins. So if you have an innocent person, an innocent man, an innocent woman sitting in prison, I have a problem with that. So we sat down with the Attorney General, myself and Kenneth Nixon, who is the current chairman of the National Organization of Exonerees, and we had a pretty tough conversation with the Attorney General. We asked him to set up a conviction integrity unit in his office. He didn't want to do that. He seemed to be opposed to that. In fact, the mind state that is prevalent throughout the country is that wrongful convictions don't happen. We get it right every time. Well, I'm living, breathing, walking proof that the criminal justice system is broken. However, I am also living, breathing, walking proof that if done properly, the criminal justice system can get it right. Now, yes, it nearly took me 20 years in order to establish my innocence. But it was because of the Conviction Integrity Unit in Wayne County, Michigan, led by the director, Valerie Newman, under the prosecutor, Kim Worthy. Now, I love what Kim Worthy is doing, because she's actually leading in the nation when it comes to overturning wrongful convictions with this Conviction Integrity Unit. And it's actually a quite beautiful thing. I've heard things like, well, we can't open up the floodgates. Now, this is coming from top officials throughout the country. I said, how can you open up a floodgate with innocent people? If there is a floodgate, then you should open it up in order to get innocent people out of prison. It is unacceptable. One of the leading causes to wrongful convictions is jailhouse informant testimony. It was used in my case, and it was used in at least half of the cases here in Michigan, where men were released in the last 3 years. 31 of us were released in the last 3 years, exonerated. And more than half of us had jailhouse informant testimony. In some of the cases, it was the same jailhouse informant. And those of us that didn't have the same jailhouse informant, those jailhouse informants were used in other cases as well. What we have come to learn is that jailhouse informants, they receive information from law enforcement, whether it's from investigator, the police department, or the prosecutor office, and they funnel them information about the case in order to gain a conviction. It becomes more about winning and gamesmanship than it do about justice. So one of the things that I really heavily advocate for is really we need to take a closer look at jailhouse informants and the way that they are used, how they are used. There's no standard. The prosecutors use some of the same guys dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And then they hide deals and say, well, you must know that this person is credible because they didn't get anything for what they're saying, but they give them a deal under the table and then let them out of jail after their testimony. And it's all off of the books. It's all off the books. And this is a common practice here in Michigan. And I'm sure that it's something that's also practiced throughout the country as well. One of the things I like to ask people is to really keep the pressure on their prosecutor office throughout the country in order for them to establish an independent unit, no matter what they call it. If they call it Conviction Integrity Unit or the Honesty Unit or whatever they want to call it, it's necessary in order to take a look at cases, because oftentimes we have rotten people in positions that take advantage of their authority, and they pursue people knowing that they don't have a case, knowing that this person is innocent. And we need to take a look back. We can't ignore the men and women that are still sitting in prison right now. We can't ignore them. But we also can't continue to practice the way that we've been practicing things, knowing that um, more wrongful convictions are going to happen if we don't change. So it's really two parts. We can't allow innocent men and women to sit in prison, sometimes on death row. Either it's death row, or it's a long a life sentence. We can't allow that, number one. And number two, we can't allow it to continue to happen. So forums like this is so important, because it allows us to come together and share ideas. But we are the people. So we are in control. So we have to find a way also to fine tune our message, and educate the public, and bring the public along with us, so that we can begin to hold the government accountable and get new laws placed on the book that will help protect people from wrongful convictions. Qualified immunity is something else that we need to really talk about. And we also have laws on the book that we need to knock down, because they lead to either over sentencing or unnecessary charges. So we have a lot to look at when it comes to our criminal justice system, and I love being a part of this. I'm a part of a brotherhood, sisterhood that nobody wants to be a part of. It's like the championship belt that nobody wants, but I'm here and I love what I do. I love fighting for righteousness. I love fighting for what is right. I love fighting for those that have no voice. And I use my platform for that. I started my business, Better Not Broken LLC, because I went into prison, and prison is intended to break you. It's set up to break you. It's set up to weaken you. But I didn't let me. I came out better, and I'm using that in order to be better for those that can't be better for themselves right now. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I can't hear you.
I apologize for the technical difficulties. Our next speaker is Claudia Salinas, and I am so sorry. I did not have your bio up. I completely apologize. Claudia, can you please introduce yourself? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Claudia Salinas. I am with the California Innocence Project. I'm one of the staff fellows there. I've been with the clinic since 2019. I started as a clinical intern, which meant I was a law student who was able to take 10 cases of my very own and investigate them, interview clients, witnesses, all under the supervision of an attorney. So I just passed the bar in July, so I just became a licensed attorney a few days ago, but definitely have been presenting on the issue of wrongful convictions for a few years now. I have a very big passion for it. And I am very excited to be here with you. Now, I only have 20 minutes, so if it looks like I am speaking very fast, it's because we have a lot to cover. But let me go ahead and pull up my presentation, and let's get started. Okay, so like I said, I'm with the California Innocence Project. We are based at the law school here in California Western School of Law in San Diego, California. And some of, like Marvin said, that we do have a lot of innocent people in prison. So the statistic that I kind of like to start off with all the time, just to preface everything, is that, current stats, test was done pretty recently, show that 4% of prisoners in the United States are innocent. So that means out of around approximately the 2,220,300 people locked up, that's over 80,000 people who are incarcerated wrongly. And that is startling. If we look at, death row alone, in the United States, that shows that about 120 people on death row are innocent. And that should frighten you enough, because that means they have a date right now scheduled to be executed. There's evidence that they might be innocent, or that they are innocent, and they are awaiting litigation to try to get that conviction reversed. So with all of that in mind, the Innocence Project, not the main Innocence Project, but the original Innocence Project was actually founded in 1992 by Barry Scheck and Peter Newfield out in New York. They trademarked the Innocence Project name, and then originally only started looking at DNA cases, probably because when you have DNA evidence, it's one of the stronger types of evidence that you can use, and courts look favorably on it because it is a very strong indicator of innocence. That has changed now. Not only do we have tons of innocence projects like mine here in California, the California Innocence Project, all over the United States. I know that even our program director, Justin Brooks, he has been instrumental in making innocence projects even outside of the country, tons in Latin America. So our type of work is growing immensely. And you don't only deal with DNA cases anymore. We deal with tons of different issues that can reopen cases, whether it be junk science or, eyewitness identifications, false evidence, all of that stuff. Most of the Innocence projects will take a look at now. Like Marvin had mentioned, there is a national registry of exonerations. They have exonerated 2,696 people nationwide. You can go onto their website. It's a beautifully made website that has the profile of each person who was exonerated, how many years they ended up spending behind bars for something they didn't commit, what state they come from, a few details of their crime, and some information of what they are doing now. If you haven't gone to this website, I definitely encourage you to do so. So our project here in California, and there are two in California, we have the California Innocence Project, ours, and the Northern California Innocence Project at Santa Clara Law School. But ours started in 1999, and we have three missions. Obviously, one, we want to exonerate clients who have been wrongfully convicted, get them out from behind bars and back to their families. Second, we want to train law students in a process in a very practical and real life way. So we want to, let them be able to take on these cases, learn about the issues of wrongful convictions, learn about the legal avenues available to reopen a case and possibly get a case overturned, and then allow them to actually do it under the supervision of an attorney. Whether they go on to be lawyers or whether it's our legal interns who don't even have a legal background at all, this type of exposure can just kind of help create advocates for, the field of wrongful convictions in general, and hopefully try to prevent some of those. And then lastly, we also want to create legislation to assist our clients, whether that means legislation, to prevent wrongful convictions, or if that's legislation of different legal avenues to reopen cases, or if it's legislation that helps compensate some of our clients who get out of prison and make their transition back into society much easier. And as you can imagine, after 18, 20, 37 years, a lot has changed, and there's a lot of services that are needed. So where do we get our cases? Oftentimes it's the incarcerated people who reach out to us. Their conviction is, it has gone through the appeal process. Multiple courts have told them no, and they have maintained their innocence. They reach out to us and say, hey, please review our case. We also get family members. We have family members who are passionate about the cases. They reach out to us and we send applications to their family member and try to start the case that way. We have attorneys, either, the defense attorneys who worked in the trial or the appellate attorneys who worked at the appellate level. We have defense investigators who might have worked at some point in the trial investigation, talked to witnesses. Maybe they just didn't have a good feeling about how the investigation went or has additional information, and they bring that to us. And then we also have some cases that come from the law enforcement and prosecutor's office. For example, Marvin was talking a little bit about the conviction review units. We do have, maintain those relationships with the conviction review units. Either they bring some cases to us where they need assistance in maybe trying to investigate the claim of innocence a little bit more, or they help us actually move our cases along a little faster. Those might be one of my favorite types of cases to work on just because it costs so much to do a DNA test. We go through tons of hurdles all the time to try to get the evidence that we need to even get tested or the documents that we need to review. But a prosecutor can almost get it to you the next day. So if we have their support on our side, not only are they not battling us in court, but they are allowing us to get the evidence that we need to be able to put on the best case available to get a conviction overturned. So we get thousands of pieces of mail every single year. About 1,500 of those are new requests every single year. And so what we do, we have our initial intake process. We have like our own guidelines, and most of the Innocence projects throughout the California, I'm sure I can't speak for all of them, but work in a similar way. For our office, it's the conviction has to have occurred in Southern California. The appeal has to be final. So meaning they did their one direct appeal from the trial level to the Court of Appeal, and they basically denied it. There has to be compelling evidence of innocence. We are, after all, the California Innocence Project, so we don't take too many cases of, self-defense or accidents, because a lot of times those defenses have already been argued in trial, and so it makes it not new evidence, and ultimately we can't open the case based on that. So we do look for factual innocence. And then lastly, there has to be a legal avenue available for relief. So there's 4 pretty much umbrella topics of legal avenues. There's new evidence. So, new information that became available that wasn't available at the time of trial. So that can be a new DNA test. That can be a new witness that came forward, something new. There's false evidence. So that means somebody lied, or, there was government misconduct that, evidence was planted of some sort. That can all kind of constitute under false evidence. Third, there's Brady Violations, which is a constitutional violation. So at the trial level, every defendant has the right to have all of the evidence that the prosecution has or is about to use against them, or is exculpatory, which means could help in their defense, turned over to them. And if that's not done, that's one of, a very technical constitutional violation that can be grounds for reopening a case as well. And then lastly, ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, I will say that one is probably the hardest to open up, the hardest legal avenue to take on solely by itself, just because right now, the standards for attorneys aren't very high. So the case that I like to highlight for that is there's a case where a defense attorney was actually asleep during the trial, and the courts have said that wasn't enough because it didn't make a difference compared to, all the other evidence that was presented. So a lot of the times we look for the other 3 legal avenues, and then if we have, some evidence of ineffective assistance of counsel, we add that on to that as well. So how do our clients end up here? You heard a little bit from Marvin. He explained some of the issues. Some of the other leading causes that we have are bad eyewitness identifications. So whether that has to do because it was stress induced, if there was some kind of violent action, there was a gun involved, oftentimes your brain perceives that memory a little bit differently because of stress inducers. It can be cross-race identifications. They say that people better identify people within their own race, and with the United States being so diverse, oftentimes you have that cross-racial identification, and it can be a major issue. We have 6-pack lineups, or faulty 6-pack lineups, as I like to say, where And you'll see an example of this later. Well, you'll have the suspect that the police officer wants to be selected, and then you have the one feature that kind of stands out is like a goatee or a tattoo on the face, and the only person in the 6-pack lineup is a person with the goatee in the lineup, and that's the person that the police picked. And none of the other 5 fillers kind of match up. We have new DNA technology nowadays. So DNA, the technology that was unavailable at that time, we're now able to kind of do retesting, and it's much stronger than it used to be, and it's constantly changing all the time, and oftentimes for the best. We already talked a little bit about ineffective assistance of counsel, a little bit about Brady violations and prosecutorial and government misconduct. There's also junk science. A lot of times there are sciences that many years ago there was experts in the field who have confirmed that, for example, shaken baby syndrome, that if you saw the triad of events, meaning, swelling of the brain and the other 2, that if you saw those 3, the only way that child could have died was through like violent shaking, which in turn was kind of turned into murder. And that's just not the case anymore. We've now learned that there's so many different reasons that those triads could occur that aren't indicators of, intentional abuse on the children. We also have bite marks evidence. I'm not presenting on any of those cases today, but there's a case where they did bite mark evidence on the victim's body, and they tried to tie that to our exoneree. And it turns out later that they were actually dog bites, and they weren't even human at all. And it wasn't until they, excuse me, I'm pulling up my timer, I'm sorry. It wasn't until they kind of revisited this science and we talked to experts in the field that we were able to show that this really is a type of junk science. And then lastly, false evidence. So that can mean people lying or, documents being modified or forged or anything along those lines. So if we talk a little bit about bad eyewitness identifications, I talked to you a little bit about the stressors and cross-racial identifications, but I also like to highlight the fact that memory doesn't function like a video camera. Your mind doesn't record everything you see like a videotape would, and it does not save a memory without making any changes. In fact, our brains play tricks on us every single day. Outside stressors often make a difference, whether it's light or dark outside, whether you're at a crowded building, whether you're in a community you're familiar with. All of these different things kind of could lead to bad IDs because your memory doesn't function like a video camera. So if you can see, I like to show this to everybody. If you stare at the cross in the middle of this video for about 5 seconds, you start to see that it's no longer just like a rose dot that's circulating. You start to see green ones, and that's just kind of your brain playing tricks on you. You also have optical illusions. When I downloaded this photo, this isn't a video. This is a still photo, but somehow our brains seem to think that they're moving. And then if you can remember from, I believe, 2014 or 2015, the hot debate on the internet about whether this dress is blue and black or gold and white, there was something in the brain that caused different people to see different things about this dress and what the color was. And the reality of it is it was very real to both of them. And that's a big issue in bad identifications as well. So one of the cases that I do like to highlight when I talk about wrongful convictions, especially if I don't have a lot of time, is Uriah Courtney's case. He's one of our clients. He had kind of this like perfect storm of convictions. He had a bad eyewitness identification. He had flawed 6-pack lineups and DNA technology that was unavailable at the time of his conviction. And so basically he was convicted of a sexual assault of a young girl who was walking down the street. She was followed by a man who was driving this type of vehicle that you can see in this photo. It was broad daylight. She started to see that he was kind of creepy and did look at, tried to look for different features, tried to see who he was, still didn't get a good feeling, but he ends up kidnapping her, taking her into a bush and sexually assaulting her. Now, this victim, she actually did as best as she could. She went home immediately. She reported the crime. She called the police officer. Thank goodness she took off her clothes and put it in a bag because it was later preserved for all of the years where we were able to retest it. But when she talked to the police officers, this is kind of the description that she gave. And these are real, very real photos of what was drawn and what was given to people to be on the lookout for. So the picture of the car wasn't too bad. You can see it does have some of the features, that it was dirty white. But the description of the suspect, all she gave was that the person was 5'6", white male, 160 pounds, and had like a goatee with lightish brownish hair. So Uriah Courtney gets involved because, again, going back to this photo, his father-in-law had this vehicle outside of his house, and someone called it in. And sure enough, when they do investigate this, the suspect description matched Uriah Courtney, our client. So this was the six-pack lineup used in his case. So if I once again remind you of the description that she gave of the suspect, she said, 5'6", about 150 to 160 pounds, goatee, blondish, darkish hair, and white male. So who would you select? I can't see all of you right now, but a lot of the people we get when I give this presentation is number 4. And sure enough, that is our client. And as you can see, there's only a certain amount of people who have goatees. There's only a few people who have the full mouth goatee. And so the choices weren't very, very good to begin with. This isn't an example of a bad six-pack lineup. So at the time of the ID, the victim stated that she was 40% sure of her identification. But in six-pack lineups, oftentimes you're shown this multiple times at the preliminary examination. Then you've also seen Uriah, who has, put in this a jumpsuit behind cuffs and shown him multiple times at the prelim. So by the time she went to trial, she was 100% sure that it was Uriah who did this. So Uriah reaches out to our office, says, hey, I am innocent of these crimes. We end up looking into his case and investigating. Like I said, thank goodness the evidence still exists, because I will say oftentimes evidence just doesn't exist anymore. And then maybe that's, something that needs to change in terms of policy, but in terms of like preserving evidence. But it did exist in this case. We were able to do some retesting and run it through the CODIS system, which is the national kind of bank of where your DNA samples go into once you are into the law enforcement agency. And so running that, we ended up getting a hit. We ended up finding that the true perpetrator was a registered sex offender who actually lived around 2 miles away from where the crime occurred. And we ended up being able to prove that and getting Uriah Courtney out of prison. As you can see, the similarities are actually kind of scary close. So nobody, was completely off. It was just if we didn't have, bad ID procedures, if DNA technology was way better at the time he was convicted, maybe this could have been prevented. But this case was really the perfect storm of everything that kind of just went bad. So he was released, reunited with his family. And we were also able to work on some reform identification kind of based off of this. So we worked on Senate Bill 923, which is an eyewitness identification reform, which required all law enforcement officers in California to use the 4 core pillars, which basically are that the procedure must be blinded. So the police officers, who are investigating the scene shouldn't be the ones creating the six-pack lineup. They have to use proper fillers. So if they have a description of a suspect, all the 6 photos in there need to have that similar description. You can't have no oddballs. The witness must be admonished certain things. So they have to be told that, it's okay if you can't identify anybody, that person actually might not be in this photo. Different things like that. And then they must get a confidence statement from the witness in their own words. So it can't be the police officer say, so you're 100% sure it's this guy, right? So it's likely this guy, right? None of that. We want the witness to say it in their own words so that we can get a better idea of their frame of thought when they make this initial identification. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is that this whole procedure must be recorded to ensure that these 4 core pillars are met. So when we talk a little bit about false evidence, I highlight the Brian Banks case, and only because it's so simple. Not simple, because there's a whole movie about it and you can go watch it. It's Brian Banks. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend that you do see it. He was a young man who was accused of sexually assaulting someone in high school. He was going to, he's on the track to be a pro football player. Didn't, after the sexual assault allegation, didn't quite get to do that. He ends up serving 5 years in prison. Gets out on parole for a while, but is on the sexual registry list for, as long before he got to us. Then he reaches out to us because he ends up getting a friend request from this Juanetta Gibson, who ends up reaching back out to him and trying to kind of make things right. And we ended up finding out in an undercover video that, he did not, or he did not rape her, he did not kidnap her. We go back to the scene, try to investigate all of these things. Again, I don't want to ruin the whole video for you if you haven't seen it, but we ultimately end up getting his conviction overturned as well, and tried to bring him back into the football field, but time kind of passes, and those 5 years that he spent behind bars probably made a difference in that too. But he is doing great things also, and going out and trying to just speak on the issues of wrongful conviction as well. So how can you help? Licensed attorneys, they can help us review cases. We take volunteers all the time. Since we do get those 6,000 pieces of mail every year. We have internships in our office, both for law students at California Western School of Law and non-law students. We have fundraising help. You could attend our various events or the events at your specific Innocence project. You can host an event in your house. We have speakers, exonerees available. We're always looking for professional services. So if there's doctors, dentists, therapists, financial planners, anything along those lines, we recommend reaching out to your local Innocence project, because they can definitely use those services in helping once the exonerees are also out. And if you can't do any of that, that is also okay. It's attending events like these to kind of learn about wrongful convictions and learn about our clients' stories, and just basically help us spread the word. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, and then hopefully that helps prevent wrongful convictions, but also helps get those people to support Innocence projects kind of like ours and in your respective states to be able to help us a little bit more. So I appreciate, I think my time is just about up, and I look forward to the questions and answers at the end so that I can interact with you guys a little bit more. But thank you for everything. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much. And I apologize about the technical difficulties. I really do.
It's okay. No worries at all. After this year, all this Zoom that we've had to do because of COVID, I am totally used to it. So thanks for having me.
Of course. And I will be bringing you back, like you said, for question and answer.
Perfect.
I would next like to introduce our next speaker, which is Anthony Wilson. Anthony Wilson was born October 2nd, 1971. He is a paralegal investigator, director of Fresh Program, and a motivational speaker. He was raised in the Washington, D.C., Prince George County area. He graduated in 1990 from Northwestern High School in Hyattsville, Maryland. In 1991, Anthony was wrongfully convicted for murder and spent 22 years in the Maryland Department of Corrections. While housed there, he attended Baltimore City Community College from 93 to 95, Copen State University from 98 to 2001, earning his certification in community studies. In 2012, Anthony was released after discovering there was 5 pieces of Brady material that was withheld from his defense counsel during his 1991 murder trial. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
How you doing, Brooke? Just let you know that the whole video went out, but anyway, I appreciate you having me here. I wanna first of all applaud Marvin Cotton and what he's doing after being released from a wrongful conviction. Definitely, I want to make sure that him and I exchange information because I want to get in contact and have a talk with him. I want to make sure I pronounce the name right. Is London? Is that right? Miss Esquire, Miss London? Let me make sure I pronounce it right. Londa.
Yes, that is her name, Yolanda Washington.
Yes. Thank you. Just watching your presentation and what your Innocent Project has been doing for those who have been wrongly convicted. Definitely, they need more people who are out there like yourself, who also, being an attorney. Congratulations on passing your bar. So my story is one that is how do I start? Brooke read it, wrongful conviction. I didn't know I was going to be here. In this place where I'm at right now, I didn't know I was going to be here. I didn't know I was going to be one of those individuals who came out and would help those who were wrongly convicted. I was always trying to prove my innocence, which came about maybe like 20 years later. So what I've learned from the system is that even when the system know that they're wrong, they don't want to correct their wrong. And when I was released, I started assisting other individuals inside the criminal justice, in the system. And I remember the prosecutor who was involved in my case, she asked me a question in the courtroom hallway. She asked me, was I bitter? And I told her that you'll see how bitter I am by how many people I assist to get out of prison. And so during the last 10 years since my release, I have been involved with several cases of wrongful convictions, which I had interviewed the witnesses, obtained evidence in those cases. And Marvin was talking about the integrity unit. So down here in Maryland, in Baltimore, Merlin Mosley started one where a lot of those individuals who were actually innocent have been coming out, been free. Prince George County has a state's attorney named Aisha Braveboy. She's now establishing a victim integrity unit so they can start looking at cases of wrongful convictions. I don't know if you ever heard of Participatory Defense, but there's an organization in Maryland called Life After Release, ran by a young lady named Kiana Johnson. And she started this program called Participatory Defense. And what happens with this program is, instead of allowing the lawyers to do all the work, the family, the community, friends, all of those individuals, they come together and become part of the process of a defendant's case. So when a defendant is going through his pretrial, his preliminaries, motions, he has a backing of community and family support that is letting the prosecutor, the judges, and the lawyers know that you're not going to just be able to do anything to this particular defendant. So it basically gives that defendant power based on his support that he has or she has to let the judicial system know that we can't just railroad this particular individual. Right now, my organization fresh. I started fresh when I came home, and what I wanted to do with that program was to prevent the younger generations from entering to that system, which Marvin already knows. Once you get in there, it's hard to get out of there. And I had a meeting with the state's attorney back then, and it was some things that didn't set well with them, because I was trying to prevent other young people from becoming a part of the system. And so what happened there was they basically pushed me to the curb. It was like, okay, yeah, we hear you talking. All right, yeah, okay, we hear what you're saying. So what I learned was that when you don't have individuals being incarcerated, locked up, you're taking jobs from individuals, you're basically interfering with funding that is coming from the federal government. And so I had to learn that these people are not really for us, far as helping those who really want to be helped. And so you have to have people like Yolanda and Marvin and myself and Brooke to come out and fight the cause, right? And what my program created was a curriculum called Knowing Your Rights and Engaging in the Political Process. With this program, we now travel across the country and we teach young adults how to exercise their Fourth, Fifth, Sixth Amendment rights when they encounter law enforcement. The purpose of this workshop was to de-escalate those encounters from becoming deadly, physically or verbally dangerous, or even deadly. We also teach them about the political process, because we try to show them that they have power collectively when they come together. Because a lot of the young kids that I encountered through my program was like, what can they do? It's like they felt like they didn't have any voices to change the system. And so what I was basically explaining to them through our workshop is that you have power through your legislators, through your council members, through your mayors, through those who are become elected officials. Those individuals work for us. And so we teach them that if you have anybody in your family that votes, if you have neighbors or friends that vote, if you can become a registered voter at the age of 16 and actually vote at the age of 18, you have the power to make sure those who have ran for office, that they stand accountable for the things that they ran on, based on protecting the community, doing certain things that they promised during running for election. And so I teach them other things about creating bills. Down here in Maryland, we take them to Annapolis to the General Assembly, so they can basically talk to their Congress members, their delegates, their senators, and we teach them how to create the bills to present to them, and we teach them how to locate those individuals who are elected officials in the district that they are in. Now, the criminal justice system, when I was like Brooke told you, I went to Cotton State University when I was in college. I was in two colleges at one time. One was called the State Penn, and the other one was called Cotton State. So that's the joke I tell everybody. But I wrote a paper, a term paper. My professor at the time, her name was Deborah Dean. I remember she told the class to write on anything they wanted to write on. And I wrote a paper called The Injustices Within the Judicial System. And basically, I spoke about everything that is now happening in our system. I wrote this paper in 1999, and I went from the judges to the prosecutor to the police to the attorneys, and I broke down everything that was going wrong within our system. Now, everything that I talked about is now being highlighted now, based on now that we have phones, video cameras, things that now that we didn't were unable to see, were unable to capture. Now we see it because people now have videos. So what I believe is that the judges have to start adhering to their authority of impartiality, being fair, looking at the evidence, and making rulings that they know may, seem like they're against one party and not for another, but which we know they're supposed to stay impartial. My thing is that I believe that it starts with the judges, and a lot of judges let things, pass when we're in the courtrooms, and a lot of times, and that's why I always tell people about, check and balances. That's why we have appellate courts, because they have to look at rulings that were made at the lower level. But my move right now is just to go around the country. I have a lot of cases that I've done. I got so many cases that I've done that I can tell you the things that I've seen that it just amazes me how you have another human being who is actually innocent. However, you will not do anything to make sure that this person is not wrongly convicted, or you won't do anything to make sure that this person doesn't receive a fair trial in their hearing. So to me, seeing a lot of things that I've seen, that's why I applaud Yolanda, and I applaud Marvin, I applaud Brooke, because we are the ones that are seeking the justice. So my information, Brooke just put my information out there, but I definitely want to stay in contact with everybody that's on the show tonight.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Anthony, for all that information and sharing your story. And I apologize. I didn't realize who you were speaking about. That was Claudia. That was with California.
Yeah, okay, Claudia. All right, I apologize. Congratulations, Claudia.
So I am going to bring everyone back on the screen for question and answer.
Great job.
Yes, thank
Great
you.
job, y'all.
Okay, and I have somebody helping me now. If she could you start putting some of the questions up? I believe there was some about the Innocence Project. And then also for the I am having a hard time with my words today. Question, after ones are exonerated, do the system give them any reparations, or do they just go free?
Yeah, you go ahead first, please.
Well, the system, for example, the Conviction Integrity Unit, which is the prosecutor office, took the steps in order to free me. And then when I get out, of course, in Michigan, we have something called WICA, which is Wrongful Imprisonment Act, where they supposed to give you $50,000 a year for your wrongful conviction. But the same system that put you in prison, got you out of prison, hire lawyers in order to fight you all the way up. So if you file a lawsuit, the same government that acknowledged that you were never supposed to be in prison hire lawyers in order to say the exact opposite. So nothing is easy when you're at war, with a system, because they look at wins and they count every dollar. So nothing is given easy. So the simple question is, you have to fight for everything, even what is owed to you.
And then I have a question. Just because you get out of prison, if they say, yes, there was issues with your original trial, you're not automatically considered exonerated, though, correct? Isn't there steps that you have to go through to be actually considered an exoneree to even be eligible for reparations?
Well, it depends. in Michigan, for example, if your conviction is vacated or if you are exonerated, it's really the same when it comes to the WICA Act. And I believe it's like that in most states. But for example, in Missouri, the only way you get compensation is if your conviction is overturned due to DNA. So you can have video evidence showing that you are innocent, showing you were somewhere else, and video evidence of somebody else committing the crime, but you wasn't released due to DNA. So the state just throw their hands in there, they let you out, and that's what it is. So it really depends on the state. The state you are in, what the law is, but no matter what it is, you're going to have to fight for it.
And then the other question I have is, we actually have a speaker who was exonerated off of death row. He will be speaking on the 9th. He had told me that it still shows up on his record. So he has a hard time getting jobs. Like, even though he was released from prison and they said that, there wasn't enough to convict him and it was overturned, it still shows up and causes him issues.
What I did was I contacted the state police and I faxed them the judge's order and everything, and I stayed on the phone with them until they took it off my record completely. So I don't know if that's a possibility in the state that he's in, but he may want to contact the state police and fax them the documents and everything he needs.
That's what I want to interject on also, because I do expungements down here in Maryland. And a lot of people don't know, just because they take it off the criminal database, when you do a case search, you still have to send it to the state troopers repository, they call it in Maryland, so they can take it what they call the NIC as the national something database where they check everything. And so you have to take it off nationally. And it's interesting you say that, because I just got a call from a friend of mine whose son been home 2 years and been on parole. A lot of people don't know this, is that anybody that has been paroled or is on probation and they do 2 years of uninterrupted supervision, that this agent automatically is supposed to do what they call an abatement of the case, meaning to close them out. But a lot of the defendants don't know that.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely, because I didn't know the steps that you had to take, and I will definitely mention that to him, Marvin. If he needs it, if he has any questions, do you mind if I connect him with you?
Absolutely. I don't mind at all.
Thank you. Do we have other questions? Sorry, give me 1 second.
It's okay.
Also, I wanted to mention, while we waiting on another question, Maryland is kind of friendly when it comes to compensation for wrongful convictions. I don't know, Claudia might see it, but Governor Hogan has been, he's even though he's a Republican, he's been giving out a lot of money to wrongful convicted individuals. And I know like almost 90% of them personally, and they have definitely been compensated in Maryland, though. Just in Maryland.
Innocence and justice it doesn't have a political party. It shouldn't have a political party. And if anybody take a position, an adverse position against someone that's innocent or someone seeking justice or have received justice, then it lets you know that, that's a character thing. That has nothing to do with, political, your political leaning, but here in Michigan, even though we are very progressive in some areas, I believe the culture to fight everything is so strong everywhere that it's going to take some time to really, really break that part up.
Yeah, if I can just add to that too, I completely agree and echo both of your thoughts. I feel like it's a trend that's hopefully changing, because people are starting to see that there's a big injustice out here and there's things that need to be done. I know in California specifically, we had a bill where we changed it from, it was under $100 to now $140 for every day someone's wrongfully convicted. But then just this year, it was passed by both parties. Senate Bill 446, I believe. And now it changes the whole, because you used to have to actually like basically relitigate your case all over again in front of the Victim Compensation Board and basically once again prove that you are innocent to them in order just to receive this money. It wasn't automatic, but now this bill changes the burden to establish like a more fair and equitable process from the wrongfully convicted person to the attorney general in the compensation proceedings. And that's going to be like a huge thing for here in California, because they were pretty much battling every single route to be able to give that money away.
Yeah, we're working with legislators here in Michigan in order to kind of rewrite and make the WICA bill a lot better than it is now. When it was first proposed not too long ago, I believe it was like 100% of the Michigan legislators voted in favor for it. So that lets you know that it wasn't everything that it was supposed to be. It's hard to get 100% of anybody on board with anything. So we're actually addressing several issues that we have with it. Some of the language, it boxes wrongfully convicted people out of their compensation. So we're working to address that now.
Good.
So there's another question. It says, are there organizations that work to expose prosecutorial misconduct? I think there needs to be a greater call for that.
I agree. I think there also needs to be a greater call for that. Unless Marvin or Anthony know of any specifically, the only ones I can really think of are like nonprofit organizations like this, not even just like mine, but the other ones that are out there that are, trying to go back and either, fix, junk science that might be out there. If it was discovered that there was like a police officer or a DA who was caught doing like one thing, like re-examining some of those cases and all the cases that they've kind of touched to see if there was like a track record there. But it kind of does take like someone kind of like starting that process and finding where that root was. Anthony, Marvin, do you guys know of any specific ones that are kind of targeting that?
No, I don't know of any specific ones that's addressing that. However, I do believe that the average citizen that votes and that are very interactive with what's going on in the community, I believe those voices are louder than really any organization. Because what prosecutor offices listen to is people that vote, because prosecutors have to be voted in. They have to be voted in and they can be voted out. So when voters start to, inquire and holding them to task and checking in on them and looking in on them, they tend to listen to that.
Well, Marvin said it earlier about the win, who can win and who win and who loses. So prosecutors are basically there to win cases. So majority of the times they are what they say overlook what they call exculpatory evidence that should have been turned over to the defense counsel. And so far as knowing of any organizations, I don't know of any organization, but I do know that they said they starting to come down hard on prosecutors who withhold Brady material in criminal cases.
Yeah, we should be the people keeping pressure on our officials. Absolutely right.
There's another question. It says, have you heard of the Guy Hines case? He was prosecuted by ex-DA Jackie Johnson in Glenn County, Georgia. He was convicted of beating 8 family members to death. He was the one who found them and called 911. How often does that happen, that the person who calls 911 is actually wrongly convicted for the crime?
I mean, I can think of one case, if not actually 2 cases, like right off the top of my head, just of the 36 that we've exonerated. One was a significant other, Kim Long. She happened to come home, find her spouse, or not spouse, significant other, dead, and she was kind of the target of the police investigation. We have another client, Bill Richards. He came home, his wife was brutally assaulted and killed outside of their house. He came home from work and was the one who called 911 and ended up getting wrongfully convicted and investigate it the entire time. So that's just like 2 of the 36. I'm sure that it happens probably more than we think.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any specific cases, but our rights are so important that something like that, you're not really thinking about your rights when you found your family members or your significant other or your spouse or somebody important, even a stranger. You're not thinking about your rights when you are calling to report a crime. But your rights are there to protect you, and I think every citizen should know their rights. That when you're speaking to law enforcement, they're trained to look for a suspect, and sometimes we don't exercise our rights, and we don't put ourselves under that light. But this is the way they're looking at us. So you have to be very careful when you interact with law enforcement, because just the nature of their job, they're looking.
Right. And Anthony, isn't that something you do? Don't you teach the youth their rights? Wasn't that what you were explaining to me?
Yes, we headed out to Atlanta on Thursday to actually teach some youth in Clayton County, Georgia, about their rights. And so you have to witness it to really appreciate the class that we teach. So, and I tell this real quick story. One of the young men that did our class was stopped by the police, Prince George County Police Department. They asked to search his vehicle. He told them he exercises Fourth Amendment rights. And the police said, "Where you learn that from?" He said, "I learned it from a class that I took." He said, "Well, since you know that, I'm gonna let you go, but stay out of trouble." And that was a real, because the officer knew that he knew something by saying he exercised. So that's what we always tell the youth: just cordially or respectfully say, "I just want to exercise my Fifth Amendment right. I want to exercise my Fourth." And I tell them the most important right you got, if you don't know nothing else, say, "I want to exercise my Sixth Amendment right." So they have to get you counsel. And once you ask for counsel, all questions are supposed to stop. So.
Yeah, we definitely have to hook up on that. I'm definitely interested in that, brother.
Yes. Yeah.
So another question is, how long does it take from the CIUs to recommend to the judge your case is credible, for the judge deciding, and how long until you get out after that? I think she's asking, like, what is the process once the CIU thinks that you should get out of prison? How long is the process?
Well, my particular case, I believe I know that person.
Yeah, that's me, Paula.
I believe my case was the second case that the Wayne County Conviction Integrity Unit accepted, because it was a new unit. My case was the second case. I think I was like number 24 that got out, that was exonerated. So I've seen cases take 4 months from application to a person walking out the door. I've seen it take 6 months. I've seen it take a year. Myself and my co-defendant, it took 2.5 years. So I really believe it's dealing with the complexities of the case. Also, you got to remember, conviction integrity units are understaffed, underfunded. I believe in Wayne County, for example, you have, I believe, 4 people that's in the unit, 2 full-time, 2 part-time, but they have hundreds of cases. So they're not just working on one case at a time, they're working on several dozen cases at a time. And I don't know how their rotation goes, but I'm sure that they don't work on every case every day. So if you're waiting, trying to establish your innocence is really a patient game. If you can maintain your patience before you go crazy, that's like really what you're trying to do. You're trying to be patient, and you're trying to maintain until you see yourself through the process.
And so, okay, Jay says the system is designed.
Real quick, the recommendation isn't given to the judge. The conviction integrity unit give the recommendation to the prosecutor. And then the prosecutor either accepts the recommendation and signs off on it, and then they file a motion, which is called a confession of errors, to the judge, and then the judge can either grant the motion, which they always do in Wayne County, or they can deny it. But I'm not aware of any motions that have been filed to a court that was not accepted.
Okay. I have a question in regards to that. I'm going to read this comment and then I'm going to ask you my question. It says the system is designed to never admit their wrongdoing. So my question is, because, you know, we have a podcast called The Low, which is a bunch of ladies from Michigan. So I have been learning quite a bit about your guys' CIU. And they have been constantly talking about the wait list, how long it takes for them to even look at the case. One of them, someone from the unit had called her and asked for information. They have an attorney, so the attorney sent all the information over, but they were then saying like it could still take quite some time. So is that common with those type of units, that that the wait list is quite long? And also, do they investigate every case that is submitted to them?
They have, they have processes set up to where they go through the applications that they're looking for newly discovered evidence that goes towards your innocence. They're looking for something new that a court haven't adjudicated. So they go through a process. They have several screening processes. So every application that's filed does not get investigated, because they don't make it through all of the different screens that's designed to weed out cases that they wouldn't be interested in. But I'm sure that some cases take priority, especially when, it's overwhelming, or they have concrete things that they can, like a videotape. One of the guys that I know from Michigan that was exonerated, Eric Anderson, he was able to obtain a video the day of the crime. It shows that he was in a different place. So, and I believe he was out 4 months from the time the application was filed to his release, like 4 or 5 months. It was pretty quick. But I'm sure he bypassed a lot of people because of the type of evidence that he had. It didn't take a lot of footwork. A lot of times they're trying to track down witnesses that's hard to find. It's been 10, 20, 30 years sometimes, and they're trying to track people down. They're trying to find people. A lot of times people don't want to be found. So that can add to the type of time that you're waiting.
Claudia, is like the CI units, are they pretty much the same in California?
Yeah, they call them CI units, CIU units, CR units, but they are kind of the same. I will say they're starting to work with us a little bit more. They do like investigate their own cases. There is, I'm sure, a wait list, just like, all the processes are. There's tons of people behind bars. But if we have kind of done like our work and we've actually gone and like investigated and talked to the witnesses and kind of are able to like present this case and kind of sit down like we are here and present it to them, and they tend to agree with us, it kind of shortens their investigation as well. They'll still go talk to the person. They'll still go talk to witnesses, check out like what evidence exists. But like I was saying at the beginning of my my presentation, is that it can cut the process. The average like exoneration is anywhere from 5 years to 15 years, if not longer, sometimes shorter. But it does tend to be on the shorter end when the CIU is involved, because you're not jumping through all those hurdles. But it is kind of the same here, at least in Southern California. I can't speak for Northern California, but they are listening to us more, which is great. And we're able to take the cases that we've already spent, a year or two investigating and kind of rely on some of the work that we've done and to hopefully expedite that process.
All right. So let me interject real quick what Claudia was saying, because I did investigation for an attorney in a case where I chased this young lady down for a year. When I finally caught her, she cussed me out and all that stuff. So, but we end up talking, and I just told her about my story, and it made her open up and basically admit that the Baltimore City Police Department said they was going to take her 3-year-old daughter had she not said that this guy was the person. If you pull this case up, if any of y'all can Google it, it's called the Jerome Johnson innocent case in Baltimore City. That's the case that I found the witness that exonerated him. Jerome Johnson, Baltimore City innocent case. And so that's what I was telling Claudia, that once I got her, she went to the attorney's office. The attorney reached out and said, "Hey, Tony, she's in the office." Several months later, like Marvin was saying, he was released. And you'll see that when you see the video, you're gonna see him walking out of the courthouse with the attorney that I work with on that case.
Thank you for that, for putting in that work too.
Yes, thank you.
I just want to say this, and then I'm gonna read the last question. So Jay Burton has been commenting all night. So for everybody, free Jay Burton. He has been incarcerated for 32 years in California for murder. He is currently fighting for his freedom, and we will be telling more about his case on Thursday. So there's your shout out, Jay. Stop commenting to me. The next question, the last one, will be, if you could give one piece of advice to someone wrongfully convicted, her husband has been in for 12 years now, what would it be? Let's start with you, Marvin.
Be relentless. Be relentless. You know, when I was in prison, you have guys that sat at the gambling table and gambled and played cards all day, all night, or played basketball every day, all day. I read books and studied every day, all day. I wrote letters to the media, to prosecutors, to lawyers, to organizations, keeping my family motivated. Because, you know, as I go, you know, I filed nearly 22 appeals and had 21 denials. So, you know, although I'm able to pick myself up and stay in the fight, a lot of times that dampers your family and your friends and your loved ones and people that support you. Sometimes they never get back up after the first loss, after the trial. So I wrote a lot of letters, keeping my family in the game, keeping my supporters in the game. I was relentless, so much so that people in the Conviction Integrity Unit, once they started investigating my case, they said, "Stop writing people." Said, "Stop writing people. Stop talking to reporters. Stop, you know, just stop." You know, but I was that relentless, and I was used to fighting. And now I'm still the same way. The fight is different now. I'm fighting for other people instead of myself. But rule number one, be relentless. Don't waste your time in prison. I turned it into a university. You know, I studied hard. I built my mind up in order to go to war. There's some very sophisticated people doing some evil things in the criminal justice system. And if you're going to go up against some very sophisticated people doing the wrong thing, you're going to have to build your brain up to go to war with that. So number one, be relentless. Number two, build yourself up. Number three, keep your family and your supporters in the game. And sometimes you only need one person, but reach out. Make sure your name, your memory, and what happened to you, make sure nobody forgets that. Send letters out. And sometimes you don't need to buy food. Buy stamps, buy paper, buy pen, write letters out and send them all over the place.
Thank you. Claudia?
Yeah, that was beautifully said. And I'll be the first to say I'll never have the insight that Marvin and Anthony had. And so I think they'll have the best advice for you. But what I can say is to like kind of keep the pressure on the politicians, on the DAs, even on your defense investigators or defense attorneys. Just keep the pressure on them. Make sure to hold them accountable when they are doing wrong. Be relentless about changing the system. It probably needs to start over from scratch, and I don't know how realistic that is from the future, but if we can like keep making more legal avenues for us to be able to reopen cases and work on more innocence cases, I think that'll ultimately lead to freeing more innocent people and hopefully even just reducing the prison population in general, because it's, like I said, I can't speak to it, but I only imagine it's the worst.
Thank you. Anthony?
All right, so I'll say this, and before I give my advice to him, when I was in, everybody in the prison system to this day remembers what I used to say. They used to always, because they call me Tony Wolf in prison. So they would say, Tony Wolf, what's up? Working on my case. Tony Wolf, what's up? Getting out of jail. Tony Wolf, what's up? Going home, staying home. I used to always say that my whole entire 22 years that I was in. So my advice is to always stay persistent, and it will pay off. Everybody that calls me from prison, even 10 years later, say, guys are now in prison took your mantra. When they say, what's up? They say, we doing a Tony Wolf. We going home. What we doing a Tony Wolf? We working on our cases. So like I say again, tell your husband to stay persistent, and it will pay off.
I like that.
Yes.
Thank you. And you are so right. Because let me tell you, a year ago, there is a guy here in Mississippi, Charlie Blunt. Now, he wasn't innocent, but he told me he was doing a life sentence as an habitual offender. And he told me, he said, I'm coming home. I'm like, yeah, okay. Let me tell you, this man is in Jackson, Mississippi right now, free. He found him a way. He said, if there's a will, there's a way. And he got himself home. So I completely agree with everything you guys are saying. And I, again, want to say thank you so much for coming on and being a speaker. I appreciate all of you, and I hope you guys have a good night. And everyone, please tune in for tomorrow. We will have Ronald Ewing, who is wrongfully convicted. We also have Mr. Rashid Edwards, who is a trauma specialist. And I hope I say her name right, Miss Chinchilla, who is an advocate for those that are wrongfully convicted. So everyone have a good night.
Have a good night.
Good
Thanks
night.
for having us.